TIL About Anne Parrish, who was browsing old books in Paris when she discovered a book that she loved as a child in New York. She showed it to her husband. He opened the book and discovered that was, in fact, her childhood copy of the book with her address and name on the inside cover. Oh, I have a similar story. My great-great-grandfather was a politician and author, not super well known, but influential in his time. My brother likes to search his name periodically on eBay to see if any neat heirlooms show up that we can collect for our family history. Now one of his books shows up, which is fairly common, but this one was signed. To my son, from the author, Lady____Day's great-great-grandfather's name. How fun, it has a connection to my great-great-grandfather and my great-grandfather. My brother reaches out to the seller and ends up buying it as a gift for my dad for Father's Day. When my dad receives the book, he's excited because he didn't already have a copy of this one book. He opens it up and sees the inscription and is thrilled. How cool that this has touched hands of 4 generations. But it gets better. My dad starts leafing through the pages and out falls a small folded piece of paper, a piece of paper my brother and the seller hadn't even noticed. On the paper is a typewriter written note with a signature below. My dad begins to read the note out loud. "Dad, I thought you would enjoy this and get a kick out of the inscription. Love, Lady____Day's aunt's name." Turns out that my deceased aunt, my dad's eldest sister, had given this book to my deceased grandfather years before and had somehow ended up donated to a thrift store after his death. So this book had been written by my great-great-grandfather, gifted to my great-grandfather, left the family after his death, was rediscovered by my aunt in the 80s, gifted by her to my grandfather, left the family again, found by a seller in a thrift store, sold on eBay to my brother and then gifted to my father. I doubt my dad is going to let go of this one anytime soon. Hopefully it will pass along to my niece and beyond. One time traveling through Ohio, I picked up a dollar bill my mom had doodled on during a trip to Arizona. Stuff is weird sometimes. When I was dating my husband, his teacher mother had just retired. She gave me a book for my daughter, from a previous marriage. It was a school-issued math book, 4th grade level. It looked familiar, and when I opened it I knew why. It was mine. This book was issued to me in the 4th grade, it had my terrible cursive name written in the checkout section those books had. I guess the last school she worked at was my old elementary school and she took some old out-of-print books with her when she left. Small world. I actually have another one. About 6 years ago in February. I was flying from NYC to Denver on business. I happened to be in first class and the man next to me read 3 newspapers the first 2 hours of the flight. We then started to chat. He was going to visit a sick relative in Colorado. Very pleasant guy named Bruce. When we got off, exchanged pleasantries. About 4 months later, I happened to get home very early for me on a Friday. We live on Long Island about 60 miles outside of NYC. My teenage daughter asked me to give her a ride to her friend's house in a town called Sayville. Sayville has ferry service to Fire Island, which is a less famous vacation spot than the Hamptons. As we are driving to drop off my daughter, it begins to rain lightly. We turn down a street and I see a man walking pulling a weekend worth of luggage. As I pass by, it is Bruce. I circle back and ask him if he needs a ride by name. It takes him a second. He says yes, and we put the luggage in the car and he says he is heading to the ferry, which is less than a mile away. I introduce him to my daughter and he must have said 4 or 5 times, "What are the chances of this happening?" We dropped him off and that was that. Not the same thing, but I once did an internet search on a subject I needed info on for work. Found a great article which contained the exact information I needed. I then realized I myself had authored the article a few years earlier. My past self was brilliant. Something like that happened to me once. I bought a small book on ecology and evolution from a second-hand bookstore. I resold it or gave it away while house moving a few years later. About 10 years later, I found the book in a box of used books at a flea market fundraiser. While leafing through it, I realized it was the exact same book, and then, I suddenly remembered. When I originally had it, I stuck a folded $20 bill under the book cover as a stash of emergency cash. Sure enough, I checked the front of the book, reached under the cover, and found the $20. My father had a poetry booklet published when he was in his 20s, he died at 30, when I was 2, 50 years ago. We had one single, unsigned, copy of it, which was with my sister. There were few prints, I assume, as he never became a real writer, he was a lawyer when he died. Some years ago, my wife found a copy of the booklet at an internet site for used books, and ordered it for me. Surprisingly, it has a handwritten and signed dedication from my father, to his then girlfriend, before he met my mother. Edit, I have to correct myself. I just grabbed the book, and it was written with his then girlfriend, so the dedication is signed by both, to someone else. Here it is, check my username, my name is the same as his, without the ferry. https://imager.com/trpboj8 jpg https://imager.com/forfgadcr jpg. The last time my father lived with us I was 2 years old. He visited us twice after that, once when I was 6. During that visit, he gifted me a book, which he inscribed to me. It was the only record of him acknowledging me. My mom inadvertently gave the book to her friend's daughter, who was struggling to read, and I never saw the book again. I purchased a vintage copy recently, hoping I'd find the one my father inscribed to me, but no luck. I had a series of books as a small child, one for each letter of the alphabet. 25 years later my son's preschool teacher had the same set. I opened one and it was my set. So cool, my son learned to read from the same set of books I did. I remember a panelist at Just a Minute recounted an experience where he found the first book he ever had published at a second-hand bookstore, and opened up to see on the inside cover, "Dear Mum and Dad, this is the first book I have written. I hope you like it." My father-in-law had a small file cabinet in his office in Georgia that they ended up buying at a yard sale in NC. Bought White Fang at book fair, started reading it. Put dinosaur sticker with my name inside cover. Cover fell off. Taped it back on, like Scotch tape lamination style. Lost book before I could finish it. Last day of school before I was moving, I'm standing in the office waiting for my mother to pick me up. Look down, my copy of White Fang is in lost and found bin. This was over a year later. Picked up right where I left off. Still one of my favorite books. I had something like this, not as cool, happened to me. Was going on holiday to Thailand and wanted a copy of Pillars of the Earth to read, as some friends had recommended it. Went into my local bookstore, Auckland, NZ, to find a copy, but they were all sold out. Forgot about it and brought a Kindle along instead. Now in Thailand they have quite a few used bookstores. Was walking down the beach in Koh Samui, and came across a little one with a handful of books, on the off chance they had the book. I peeked in and they did. Awesome. Went to start reading it and the price tag was from the bookstore chain, Whitco Yules, and the receipt had been used as a bookmark, and was from my local branch, Queen St, Auckland. I always wonder who the fellow Kiwi was who read Pillars of the Earth on holiday and sold it for a few baht before they left. This happened to me at City Lights after I moved to Oregon. While in SF at City Lights I told my wife about a book I'd sold in New York before moving. She took a book off the shelf and held it up, like this one. Inside the cover was my name and date. I took German for a few years in high school, and my teacher loaned me a German book of hers called Momo to read. Years later I was tutoring German and reached out to her to get some tips, and found out she had passed away recently. I went to the thrift store soon after to find some tutoring materials, and there's a copy of Momo on the shelf. Open it up, and see a couple annotations, the same ones that were in the copy she loaned me. Yes, I bought the book. I still have it in fact.